first of all, I'll remind everybody that this is recorded, which you probably also just got on your screen. And we tend to post it after the fact. I'll also just remind folks that the subject matter of this working group is the impacts of any work going on this site, including obviously the Brownfield Cleanup Program and the concerns people have in the community about any contamination that might occur. Recognizing there are other forums where other public policy questions regarding this project are being addressed. This is not the forum to discuss the overall wisdom of building this building, but very much a forum to make sure everybody has the same information and has their questions answered, and that any issues related to the construction are addressed. So I think the agenda, I think Emily, I should note Emily Lang is been doing a lot of the work coordinating this, so thank you, Emily. And we're going to just, I think, begin with updates on the Brownfield Cleanup Program from DEC. And then I think Langan is going to give us updates as well. And then we'll hear from the community consultants. And then we'll have the stakeholder discussion and question and answer. Any sort of comments, concerns about the agenda? This is, I should note, co-convened by the offices of Jerry Nadler and Christopher Marte and Yuli New and our Borough President, Mark Levine, and Community Board 1. I guess I should offer if anybody from any of our co-conveners have any kind of preliminary remarks as well. Okay, without further ado, do you want to DEC?
All right. Good morning. This is Heidi Dudak. I am a section chief in Division of Environmental Remediation, overseeing the 250 Water Street Brownfield Cleanup Program site remediation. So just to give a brief update as to where we are here on April 5th, DEC and New York State Department of Health continue to work with HHC, who is the applicant in the Brownfield Cleanup Program, and Langan Engineering, their engineering consultant, and the community consultants Laura Dodge from Excel Environmental and Tom Facillo from Ramble to ensure the 250 Water Street BCP site remediation is protective of human health and the environment. Since the last meeting, which I believe was in early February, Langan has completed the 250 Water Street remedial design investigation. This investigation included test pitting and waste characterization sampling across the site. Excel Environmental and DEC provided oversight on various days in the field while Langan Engineering was completing the work. Langan will be presenting the results from those investigations with the data that's available in their review. Langan Engineering has also submitted a remedial action work plan or RAP schedule change. This was done in response to public comments. The mercury hotspot remediation will now be completed, as was intended, after the neighboring schools, the Peck Slip School and the Blue School, have closed for summer recess. And with the change in the mercury hotspot remediation, the current remediation schedule at the 250 Water Street site, which again Langan Engineering will be going over, will begin in an area in the southern half of the site outside of the mercury hotspot area where the 421A foundation element is going to be installed. Not related to the actual 250 Water Street BCP site, as everyone is, I'm sure, aware, Con Ed responded to an emergency steam line issue and began repair work last week. Con Ed was aware of the 250 Water Street BCP site, and their environmental group have reviewed all of the documents that are currently on our DEC info locator, which includes the remedial investigation report, the RAP, the HASP, which is the health and safety plans, the community air monitoring plans, and the data that's been available. Con Ed coordinated with DEC and DOH. We communicated our camp requirements to Con Ed, and they prepared a camp that has been deemed protective of human health. And that is a quick update as to where we are on the 250 Water Street. Thank you.
Great. So can everyone hear me? Thumbs up. Yes, great. Amazing. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to start with Langan's presentation. Are you sharing screen, Mike? Oops. Yes. Okay, great. You can go to the next slide. All right, so as Heidi mentioned, the remedial design investigation, the field effort is complete. The RDI included two parts. The first was a test pit investigation, and the second was a waste characterization investigation. The test pit investigation included excavating a total of 5 test pits across the site at different locations, keeping soil exposed for a total of 1 hour, and then evaluating the sufficiency of the camp air monitoring plan that's been established for the remedial action. The waste characterization included collecting samples across the site to characterize waste for future excavation and offsite disposal. So to touch on the test pit investigation data, if everyone recalls, the way the camp is set up is it includes 6 perimeter air monitoring stations, as well as a work zone station, which migrates with the excavation locations. And we also have a dedicated mobile monitor, an individual that holds a J505 that collects instantaneous mercury vapor readings. So what this table shows are the results, the maximum and the average concentrations over 1 hour from each test pit from the 2 monitors that are located most proximate to each test pit. So as I mentioned, on the right-hand side, we have the work zone, and the work zone is set up immediately proximate to the test pit. And on the left-hand side, we have the mercury vapor monitor, and that is the mobile monitor. So that individual migrates between the test pit and the perimeter of the site as the work is conducted. That individual can also use the J505 to screen the soils that are coming out of the test pit. So the camp action levels are all the way to the right. You can see the perimeter stations are 1 microgram per meter cubed. The work zone is 10 micrograms per meter cubed. The work zone stations, the maximum readings did not, they were 0 across the board for each and every test pit. So they didn't even come close to meeting or exceeding the work zone action level. The handheld mercury vapor monitor, we did have some low level detections. Again, the highest was 0.36 at test pit TP02, and that did not come close to exceeding a perimeter station action level. Now, the next thing we wanted to do was address a couple of erroneous camp exceedances and provide some additional information on those exceedances. So on February 12th, 2022, we had an erroneous exceedance, camp exceedance, action level exceedance at the perimeter monitor PM2, which you see in kind of the northwestern portion of the screen. At that time, we were excavating TP02. PM2 station was located approximately 120 feet away and in the up gradient location with respect to wind direction. The minute that the exceedance happened, and the exceedance happened around 12:48 p.m. And lasted for approximately 13 minutes. At the time that that happened, to respond to it, we did a couple of things. We checked the instantaneous readings within the work zone, and those were 0.00 and 0.05. The other thing that we did is we took the J505 monitor and we brought it over to the PM2 workstation, and the unit was 0.01. So we were able to determine, based on the fact that the air immediately proximate to TPO2 did not reflect any exceedances of the camp action level, even on an instantaneous level, and also based on the fact that PM2 was in an upgradient location with respect to wind direction, that the detection was erroneous. The next exceedance, if we can go to February 13th, next slide, and I know these slides look very similar, but there are subtle differences, which I will step you through. The second exceedance occurred on February 13th, 2022. At that time, we were excavating TPO4 over in kind of the northwestern portion of the site, and the exceedance occurred at the perimeter station PM5. Again, I'll draw your attention to the wind direction, which was from Peck Slip towards Beekman Street and not the other way around. The PM5 station was located approximately 200 feet upwind of Test Pit 04 work zone. At the time that the exceedance occurred, which was 10:52 a.m., we were backfilling Test Pit TP04. We used the J505 to read instantaneous readings within the work zone, and those ranged from 0.0 microgram per meter cubed to 0.6 microgram per meter cubed. Oh, sorry, 0.06, big difference. The work zone station, three other stations, the work zone station, which is immediately proximate to TPO4, PM3, which is immediately west and down gradient from a wind direction of TPO4, and PM6, which is just north of TPO4. Those readings remained 0.0 micrograms per meter cubed during this time. As we did with the other erroneous exceedance, we took the J505 unit, we walked it over to PM5, and the readings were 0.0. So we determined based on all of these data that the readings were erroneous. Next. Now, just to step you through the remedial design investigation results, as I mentioned, we characterize soil across the site that we anticipate will be excavated and disposed of off-site as part of the remedial action. In total, basically what we do is we grid the site in 3 dimensions in about 800 cubic yard cells. Within each cell, we advance borings and we collect sample sets to characterize that soil. The methodology that's used for sampling is dictated by receiving facilities. The facilities require 2 types of samples. A grab sample, which is just what it sounds like. It's an immediate grab of one location of one aliquot of soil from within this 800 cubic yard cell. And the other is a composite sample that is collected by taking small aliquots from multiple locations within the cell, mixing them and placing them in a jar. That's called a composite sample. So each sample set was comprised of 1 grab and 1 composite sample. The samples were analyzed for a suite of parameters that is regularly required by receiving facilities that receive soils from construction sites around New York City. The results, we did find some mercury in soils, which we expected. The highest detected concentration in a composite sample was 7.94 micrograms per kilogram. We also ran an analysis called T-CLIP, and essentially what it does is it takes an aliquot of soil, it runs a liquid through that soil to see whether or not the lead concentration in the soil is leachable, meaning whether it becomes suspended or it becomes dissolved within this liquid that is passed through the soil column. Then subsequent to that, the liquid is analyzed, and the T-clip lead concentration exceeded the hazardous waste limit in a single sample. The sample was located in the southwestern part of the site near Beekman and Water. It was located towards the bottom of the fill layer. I believe it was around about 9 feet below grade. The total lead concentration was 275 micrograms per kilogram, and the T-clip lead concentration was 5.49 micrograms per liter, which slightly exceeds the hazardous waste threshold of 5.0 micrograms per liter. One of the other things that we did during the preliminary waste characterization effort was to delineate an area where PCBs were identified on the site. And we were able to successfully delineate that area. Concentrations that we identified were below EPA's TSCA limit, which is a relatively high limit that we did not exceed, which is great because it requires some special handling and disposal procedures and other measures. Now, moving on to the schedule change notification, Langan proposed a schedule change to the DEC, which they accepted and approved. The schedule change really switches around only 2 things in the schedule. The first is that the mercury impacted hotspot and UST removal is now delayed until after schools are closed for the summer. So that work will begin in late June or early July 2022. The second schedule change allows for early foundation elements to be installed on a portion of the site, and I'll get into some details about this in a minute, starting on or around April 15th, 2022. Okay, next slide. All right, so to go over some of the early foundation and remediation work. What is planned? Essentially, there's going to be a number of measures that are undertaken. The first will be the closure of the parking lot and construction of this green perimeter fence, which is a standard construction fence around the entirety of the site. The next thing that will happen is there will be removal of a couple of existing parking structures, which include the small shed where the operators of the parking lot spend their time and make change, etc. The next thing that will happen is there will be steel sheeting advanced for supportive excavation during pile cap construction over in this southwestern portion of the site. After that, 4 steel piles will be driven to about 85 feet below grade. They will be drilled to about 85 feet below grade. The next activity includes excavation and offsite disposal in this area to approximately 8 feet below grade. There will be deeper localized excavation from about 8 to 18.5 feet below grade for the pile cap installation. Finally, formwork will be placed and the pile cap will be poured and installed. And then the area will be backfilled to above the water table using imported backfill. And that backfill will be bermed to about 7 feet below grade. Dewatering and pretreatment will be performed as necessary to complete the pile cap construction. I want to just draw your attention to a couple of things on this site. Kind of in the northwestern portion of the site along Pearl Street, you'll see 2 little red flags. That will be the entrance to the site. That's where vehicles will enter and leave the site during these activities. It will include a wheel wash, and there will be somebody that will be monitoring the trucks as they leave the site to make sure that they're not dragging soils from the site out into the streets and sidewalks. The trucks will be direct loaded during the pile cap construction and early foundation work as well. All right, next slide, please. So just to provide a little bit more detail on schedule here. Again, this work will begin on or around April 15th, 2022. So in just about 10 days, 9 days actually. The first exercise will take about 15 days of the first half, and that will include pre-construction surveys of neighboring buildings identified in the EIS, the construction of the perimeter fencing around the site. As you can see, there's a lot of linear feet, so this will take some time, as well as the selective removal of the existing parking lot structures. It will take approximately 9 days to install the 4 sheet piles, which will be drilled to about 85 feet below grade surface. It will then take about 3 days to install steel sheeting for supportive excavation during pile cap construction. It will take about 3 days to excavate and dispose of soil and fill to about 8 feet below grade in the area that was shown on the prior figure. And there, again, there will be some deeper localized excavations from about 8 to 18 feet below grade for the pile cap installation. It will take about 6 days to install formwork and install the pile cap within the excavation area. And then about 2 days to backfill that excavation area to above the water table using imported backfill. As mentioned, dewatering and treatment will be performed as necessary to allow for pile cap construction. And as an ongoing security measure, once the fence goes up, there will be 24-hour on-site security, and that's an ongoing measure. Now on to Q&A. That's the end of our presentation. Thank you.
Brian, you're muted.
Sorry, I think before we do Q&A, I think it might make sense to hear. Do people have specific questions about this, or we might want to hear from the community consultants first, sort of reactions and questions, and then go to the rest of us?
I think
That sounds good.
Okay, so if there are no objections, Laura?
Yes. Hey, can you see me? I don't know why my camera's not. Oh,
Oh, now we can.
can you see me? No?
I just see your
You
name.
have 2 different things. You have one where we can see you and then another that says your voice. So you're okay.
What? So you can see me?
It looks like
Yeah.
somebody else might be logged in, maybe in your office
Oh,
with another lower dodge.
I think you're good. You're good to
There you go. It's gone now. I just see you now.
But we're going to lose Laura's. I think that was her voice.
Her audio.
She was logged in twice.
Tom, do you want to go first, maybe?
Sure, sure. Happy to go first. Appreciate the presentation by Langan in terms of the plans for the work going forward. Representing the Blue School, we've had discussions with Langan and DEC and DOH regarding Blue School's concerns about the activity that's going to be occurring relative to noise impacts, ensuring that those impacts are minimized. I understand that the activity that's going to create the most noise and vibration will be the driving of the sheet piles that Mimi talked about. I understand that Langan and HHC are considering means and methods to minimize the impacts during the work on the adjacent schools. We appreciate that they are considering that to try to minimize the impact of those activities. In terms of the excavation work, we've had a chance to review the plans that Langan just provided, and it appears that the appropriate steps are being taken to address the soil contamination that's located in an area. The fact that this pile cap is going to be not installed in an area that's not does not have the highest concentrations of mercury. So that's I think a positive. We'll continue to monitor that activity. One other thing I wanted to bring up that the Blue School is concerned about is, which Heidi, you mentioned the Con Ed work associated with the emergency steam pipe repair that was done on Pearl Street. Con Ed is also planning to replace some piping. I think it's a gas line on Water Street, and then that will be immediately adjacent to the 250 Water Street site. And I know Blue School has expressed concerns about the activities that Con Ed will be performing and the monitoring. I understand from Heidi that the community monitoring program and sampling will be consistent with what's been agreed to on the Pearl Street. Is that correct, Heidi?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And I also understand that work has been delayed so that Con Ed can develop plans for how that work is going to be completed safely to protect the community and the schools. So we appreciate that.
Tom, do you have any sense of the time frame of when Con Ed plans to do that work at this point?
I spoke with Con Ed this morning. They're still not sure. That's a gas line replacement. It's on the schedule, depending on how other work elsewhere goes, sometime in the next month or two. They don't have a definitive date yet.
Okay. If you could let me, I guess we'll have a few follow-up items, but maybe we'll just let the group know. We'll also, I know some of our offices have been in touch with Con Ed about the prior work too, so maybe we'll also reach out to them as well.
And then I guess the other thing I would add is in terms of the modification to the schedule such that the Mercury hotspot area and the underground storage tanks near the corner of Peckslip and Water Street is now scheduled to be completed while school is not in session, and that's certainly appreciated.
Good. Okay, Laura, do we have you back?
Yes, I'm back. Sorry about that. Little Zoom glitch. So a few things. Thanks, Tom, for providing your insights. I also wanted to mention that while the test pit work was being done during the RDI, the Remedial Design Investigation, we did do periodic site inspections, but also Langan and I spoke by phone because they were, just wanted to relay the malfunction of the drill meter in the camp unit and to go through what they did, and they did follow all the appropriate protocols. And unfortunately, this kind of thing happens with this type of equipment. There really aren't any meters that are foolproof in terms of having either an electrical incident occur or a weather-related incident occur. But from my experience in this type of monitoring, the number of incidents has been very low on this site, very few and far between. So that increases, your confidence level in the data. So I just want to relay that because I was actually very impressed with the way Paul McMahon from Langan handled it. And I was appreciative of the fact that he called and discussed it with me. Regarding the proposed work, as Tom indicated, we did have a call and a review of the proposed activities. I think personally, we're very appreciative of the fact that the mercury impacted soil tank work is being scheduled after schools are out of session. And I think initiating excavation for this initial foundation work will actually be a good trial run, if you will, of the protocols that will be utilized for the full-scale remediation. I'm glad to see the fence going up around the entire site. I'm glad to see the 24-hour security. I think the way the site is going to be set up will enable the contractors to have sufficient room to work so that they're not confined to a small, corner of the site while they're doing this work. That enables them to do it safely, more safely, and also with strict adherence to all the protocols. Very pleased to see that they're doing the soil offloading directly into the trucks as they're excavating to the extent possible based on just timing. One question I did have is for offloading of soil, if Langan can provide us just a rough estimate of how much soil by volume is going to be generated during the initial foundation work, and where the trucks that will be coming in to be offloaded will be staged, if there's going to be a need to have trucks idling, waiting to be filled, or if they're going to be bringing all the trucks onto the site. That's one logistical detail that we really didn't get into yet. That might be something, if they don't have that information yet, that would be something that would be good for us to understand. So the community is aware of how the trucks are going to be running around the perimeter of the site. Obviously, that work will be done, while school is still in session. So there's concern over, truck idling and just trucks, truck movement and safety with respect to
So
the.
Laura, I can address that right now. There'll be about 40 trucks through the total early foundation work. We're anticipating about 4 or 5 trucks per day that may make a couple of rounds. The goal is that they are not idling. We do have quite a bit of room at this moment during this early foundation stage.
Right, great. Okay, that helps. So they're going to be coming into the site and being loaded and then.
Loaded. And then they'll go out and they may return to the site for a second load in a single day.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks for that clarification. And again, obviously the piles, from what we understand, the steel piles are being drilled, not driven. The steel sheeting is going to be driven. So though, there will be obviously concerns when that work starts with respect to noise to the community. But as Tom indicated, all appropriate measures are being taken to try to mitigate that to the extent possible. And essentially, I mean, we're relieved to have the camp that Con Ed had proposed for use. DC did provide that to me yesterday. So I'll be reviewing that, and it does right now look like the action level is consistent with the site action level for mercury. And it seems like it's an appropriate level of monitoring using the proposed camp stations in a similar manner, in addition to the downwind monitor holding the handheld instrument. So it seems like a very similar setup to the camp that's being used for the BCP site. But we definitely would like to, know for sure in advance when the next phase of work is going to be started, so the community is prepared, which Tom has already spoken to. I think that's all I have right now. I mean, we're, appreciative of the update and the level of interaction between the agency, Langan and Tom Facil and I. I think we've had a lot of good opportunity for dialogue, and we appreciate that.
Okay, so we're now going to go into questions and answers. So I think I see in the chat, Maggie had some questions that came up during Mimi's presentation. So Maggie, maybe you want to start, and if people can use the raise your hand function, I'll try to sort of recognize people as they come up. So I see Grace Lee on deck, and then.
So Senator Kavanaugh, I read Maggie's questions so I can respond to them straight away if that's easier.
I guess up to Maggie, but
yeah, I just had a question about, because I know, thank you, Mimi, for going through the data. I had a chance to look through everything, and 2 of the days that stuck out to me were the 22nd and the 23rd of February. There was quite a bit of data points over the action level. Like on Tuesday, there were 26 numbers that were over the action level, and I just wanted to get some more information so I could understand it. Some of those numbers that were over, like there was 3 different stations at the same time at like 8 o'clock in the morning that had elevated levels, one as high as 17 micrograms, which is way over the 1.0 action level. So when you guys have the Jerome, you go over and you check it. Can you just explain the process of like you get, so at like 8 o'clock, there's a reading that's spiked. How does that process work? How long does that take for you guys to go over and check it with the 505?
Sure. So all of the camp stations are hooked up to telemetry. So what that means is that immediately when there is an exceedance of either an instantaneous reading or a 15-minute average, Langan field staff are notified, and the duration between that notification and when we walk the J505 over to confirm or further evaluate the concentration that was identified at the perimeter camp station is literally as long as it takes for the notification to happen and our field staff to walk over to confirm the reading or to further evaluate the reading.
So like
then-
2 minutes?
A couple of minutes, yeah.
Okay, because my question is, you guys then showed the handheld data and said it was at 0, but if you look at those camp stations, those elevated spikes were only for 60 seconds, 2 minutes at most.
Mhm.
So if you do walk over with the 505, both the 505 and the 404 at that point are reading 0, correct?
0 or close to 0. I mean, I would need to look specifically at the data, but the important note is that when we went over to confirm the readings, they were not above the action level.
Right, but
And
then it
the,
sounds like they were matching the 405 readings at that point, which had also come down. I mean, there were a couple instances where it stayed.
I think also
Elevated.
though, like when you were looking at the data on, this is Heidi Dudek, especially at the 8 o'clock data, looking at the work zone to see if there had actually been anything in the work zone. And in those cases, there wasn't anything simultaneously with that. I think that's,
Well,
they'll go
I'm
and they look at it
actually
as a whole.
not surprised because the way mercury behaves, it's 7 times more dense than air. So it is going to float and kind of go to the ground. And that was one of the concerns that I had about the monitoring. What height are you guys holding? Because in the pictures and the reports, the 505 is usually about waist height, right? Like the tech is holding it waist height. Are you guys ever doing sampling right on the ground, a couple inches off the ground where that mercury, I mean, I brought this up to Laura months ago, and I really have concerns that these camp stations are high, and you can explain the thought process. I know VOCs behave completely differently. They evaporate, the dust goes up in the air, but to have those Jerome meters 3.5, 4 feet off the ground, I'd be curious if you guys are also taking data samples in the lower level.
So a couple of things. One, the entire camp is set up to evaluate exposure risk to individuals that are breathing. And breathing height is determined by the Department of Health to be 3 to 5 feet. At our last meeting, I know Scarlett touched on this, that is kind of a set interval, and that's really where if you're evaluating exposure risk for individuals through inhalation, where readings should be taken. Having said that, our mobile monitor, as I explained, they really have a number of functions. They tend to migrate between the work zone and between the perimeter of the site. They also, on occasion, use that monitor to screen soil. Elaine, can you go on mute, please? Thanks. They also use the monitor to screen the soil in the open test pit or any open soils. So in those instances, on occasion, the meter is brought directly towards the exposed area, including at heights lower than 3 feet.
Right, and just to add to that, this is Scarlett from New York State Department of Health, Region Chief for the New York City area. The reason that we set that at the 3 to 5 feet really is for breathing height. We want to know what people could more likely be coming in contact with and how any sort of site work could affect surrounding communities, children and adults. Mercury, even though, to the point of it being denser than air, you might see it a little bit closer to the actual work zone there. And as Mimi pointed out, that's why, they'll bring that monitor a little bit closer to there. But as you get farther away from there, you have wind. Wind is going to disperse it. And we really want to make sure that we're going to have action levels that are going to be looked at in relation to what people could be breathing in. We wouldn't expect it to just kind of hang out at the ground and continue to disperse at the ground.
Why not?
Because you have wind. Wind is going to cause it to disperse in air. And for what we want for Department of Health to make sure we're protective of human health and the people is we want it to be reflective of what they could actually breathe in. We wouldn't expect higher concentrations from the work zone farther away at a lower level there. You have wind and other things. You're not in a stagnant environment.
Right, but if the mercury is going to just sit down there, it's very dense. I mean, what I'm trying to get at is what I'm going to ask you guys. One of my requests is that when you guys are on site and you begin this work in April, that if the camps are going to be up really high, Is there a way that someone could be walking around with a 505 that could be looking at what are the mercury levels along the ground? I mean, one of the stations, Malvern pointed out, the camp station along Beekman Street often had low elevated levels of mercury throughout all of this in summer 2020, December 21, and we couldn't figure out why. And she went and looked, and that topographically, that is a low point in the lot. So what we're hypothesizing is that mercury is sort of floating along the ground and hanging out. And so if that mercury is sort of sitting there and something kicks it up, and then it moves up and is caught by the camp, and then quickly, what do you see after 2 minutes? The mercury gases, vapors falling back down. It doesn't mean that it's gone. It just means that we're not necessarily monitoring that. So my request would be, is that a possibility that whoever's on the site to just, since the camps are high, kids in strollers, kids playing on the ground, they're on the sidewalk with chalk, those kids are not 5 feet up in the air like the camp. They're breathing in air at a lower level, and that air can also get kicked up. So if the mercury vapor is sort of hanging out down there, if it's at a higher level, it gets kicked up, there's possibility. So that would be my request based on what we're seeing on the data. I mean, also, a lot of the data was explained away on the Wednesday, the 23rd, there was a spike at PM2 at 11:26, high elevated reading around 9.27 micrograms, but there was also readings at multiple camp stations. And so I really am frustrated that the response, and Laura, I heard what you were saying about there are data readings on meters that you have malfunctions. I understand, but when you have 3 machines showing elevated levels at the same exact time, how are we explaining all 3 of those as a data malfunction? There was also a peak, and this wasn't noted in the reports, but there was a peak in the dust at the same exact time at 11:30. The dust monitoring 2 times on that Wednesday were over the action level. Once at 7:41 a.m. it was 150, and then at 11:30 it was over the action level at 114. So coinciding with the higher mercury levels, there was also a spike in dust, indicating that there was contamination in the air. This just wasn't an equipment malfunction. I know I've taken up a lot of time. I just wanted to share that. We can continue the conversation later, but I wanted to point that out, that I still have concerns that there's quite a bit of mercury there. And I want to make sure that we're monitoring where the mercury is most likely to be found and where the kids could also potentially breathe that in.
Can I ask something that I think might be a helpful explanation, which is why the action levels are set based on 15-minute time-weighted averages, and how is there risk associated with a instantaneous spike?
Well, I would push back and say that you guys are monitoring 6 feet out of the 900 feet of the perimeter of this lot. We're looking at a really small amount of data and making assumptions based on that. We don't know what, if there's spikes here, I mean, it could be happening in a lot more locations.
Maggie, I was asking Scarlett to perhaps respond to that.
My apologies, sorry.
Yeah. I think it'll be helpful.
So to answer that, in general, the camp action levels that are set with a lifetime of exposure to that concentration, as far as whether or not that would be a potential concern. So in general, they're extremely conservative. If we had, rather than a 15-minute average, if we had a 30-year concentration of somebody continuously being exposed at that level, we wouldn't necessarily expect any sort of health effects from it. This is something that we want to make sure that we're extremely conservative with. These are not based on a health effect. These are not based on, we think if someone comes in contact with an exceedance of the action level for even the duration of the project or the duration of time that they're in school, that there would be health effects associated with it. We just want to make sure we're extremely proactive, because honestly, we don't really want anyone to be exposed to anything related to the site. And so we have low detection limits. We have very, very conservative action levels set here. And we're confident that these are protective of public health. I mean, another thing to note too, is we're really looking at wind direction. And a lot of these exceedances that occurred out of the action level are not downwind concentrations. There may be dust that's kicked up when wind goes. And there's, there's a certain very low level of mercury in general in urban areas too. And our main focus here is the work on the site and if that can affect the surrounding community. And it's important to note that, again, I mean, these levels are extremely conservative. And yes, we can't sample everywhere around the entire perimeter of the site. You can't have a station in every single area, but we have a lot of camp monitoring stations that are out there. We're extremely protective, and we want to make sure that all of this work is done in a manner that's protective of public health. And so far, we believe it absolutely has been.
Okay, so thank you for that. I think we're gonna, Meg, if you're okay, I think we'll jump to the next question. Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have Grace Lee and then Lawrence Hong from some of our news office.
Hi, thanks everyone for being here today and for answering all of our questions. Just one comment on like the height of the air monitors. I have a 4-year-old at Blue School and she is 36 inches tall, and she's actually probably one of the tallest kids in her class. And so we actually have children who are much closer to, who are shorter than 3 feet. So I think that it's worthwhile to just kind of explore some different heights for monitors and we also have a pre-K. We've got the pre-K center also at Pack Slip. So if
can we just add that? Sorry to interrupt, Grace, but can we just add that to a list? Can the the monitors, the agency, just give us review that question and get a whether it's worth considering different heights?
Exactly. Yeah,
I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm not asking for a comment right now. And then the second thing, similar to that, and really appreciate that the mercury action levels were brought down to accommodate a more sensitive receptor population close to the site. Would like to also have the hazardous waste limits and the EPA toxic substances control act limits also reviewed in consideration of the more sensitive receptors by the site, just in terms of like what is acceptable for these for the populations close by. I know because these are like general limits, and I just want to make sure that we're working around that. And then the other,
Grace, if I can just respond to that quickly. The EPA hazardous waste thresholds are thresholds that have been set at the federal level by EPA. With respect to waste disposal. So that's what those limits pertain to. It's not about, health exposure.
Okay, got it. The soil, what's in the soil. Okay, that's helpful.
And then the TSCA limits for Ptbs, those are also set, I believe, at the federal level, and those have to do with if your soil exceeds these TSCA concentrations with PCBs, then it just requires special handling, special disposal, special sampling to confirm that remediation is complete, et cetera. So again, and DEC, DOH, please correct me if I'm wrong here. These don't pertain to health arrest.
That's correct. Those are waste disposal requirements.
Yeah.
Okay, understood. Thank you. And then just one other thing, it would be nice if prior to the work, if Langan could come present to the community board about kind of like how the work is going to get done, or at minimum have some type of presentation to the community about kind of the traffic patterns and how the trucks are going to be coming in and out of the site. Also, a full kind of explanation of what the noise mitigation, that will be put into place while this work is done. So that's just another request. Thank you.
Are you good, Grace?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Any response? I mean, I assume there'll be further conversation with the community board about trucks and traffic and
Just anything unusual has been asked. If everybody on this call remembers, we have built another building right across PS 234, and all of these questions were asked and accommodated by the developer and the applicant team. So this and more. So this is a basic ask.
Mhm. Okay. Is there just a response from anybody on the development?
Yeah, well, we certainly will be working with the surrounding community, including the schools, to minimize noise, and there are a series of mitigations and measures outlined in the EIS that we will be implementing, including noise barriers. And it was touched on earlier that in this case, with the limited 421A work, the trucks will be, there'll be a limited number of trucks, and idling will be minimized. They'll be staged on site. So there are a series of those measures that will be in place, not only for 421A, but will be expanded, as we move forward in the project.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to Grace, if you're good, Lawrence.
Hey, thank you. So I had one question and a possible follow-up question, and this is probably to either DC, DOH, or perhaps Howard Hughes. So what was mentioned to us during that Con Ed unplanned work incident was that DC does not have jurisdiction over work outside the site. So, I mean, assuming that is true, do they then only have jurisdiction if, I guess, mercury is detected, or if a population is harmed, or is that under DOH? Who is like the enforcing authority when something like that occurs? Like if there was the possibility of mercury, clearly Con Ed did not know that there was, because they immediately stopped work after elected officials.
No, that's actually not true. This is Heidi. Actually,
Okay.
they were aware of it. We spoke with their environmental services while you were, I don't know exactly who you talked to. We talked to the environmental section chief. They were aware of the 250 Water Street. It was an emergency repair line that went into, that had to be addressed immediately there. That work is yet to be finished, but they have put the patch in. There is still a small leak there. They communicate with us. They do their own environmental assessment when they go into an area to make sure that they understand what's there. They have, as with any kind of construction, an obligation to report anything to the DEC if they find something that's part of their monitoring plan. Under the current camp, they will be providing us data. They have the same action limits. They're going to have the same response as would on the site. They have Merconex. If they have anything, then they would close up the hole in that, and they would notify DEC and DOH.
Okay.
But
So, sorry, the follow-up to that is, what you're telling me is that they were aware of it, they opened it up, they stopped work, and then they did testing. So is that proper procedure? Is that how that's supposed to operate? Like
they were running.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure what testing you were.
But I was told
think
that
they were aware of it.
They
They had
soil
to.
and then they tested overnight. Is that not true?
We asked them to test the soil there. They normally would not do that. We just asked them to test the soil since they were there.
Uh-huh. Okay, so the proper procedure, you believe that proper procedure was followed throughout that process? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then
we've coordinated with them, and just because I have been speaking with them, and they wanted to make sure that everybody understood. They're aware of the site, the current line. There is, because I'm sure somebody will notice, there is still a small steam leak there. However, they won't be coming back sometime later this week. The work that needs to be done will be done at night. They will be following the camp. They have the requirements. And with regards to that work, that was an emergency repair work, which is not the same as the work that was planned for the gas line on Water Street. Just to clarify that.
Sure. No, I understand that it was emergency repair work. I was just kind of confused about like the process of events, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, they have a HACCP that they follow for all work. Since they don't know what they're going to get, that they have to protect their workers, and that's what they were working with. And then as they reached out to their environmental people, then that's what happens. So they have to first go out there under an emergency response, and they have a HACCP that they follow.
Okay, so then the follow-up to that then is whose responsibility is it to alert any other agencies or infrastructural projects or people who do infrastructural projects? Is that under DC, DOH, the applicant?
It's not the people who are doing it, because it's already out there. It's on our DEC info locator. So if somebody's going to be doing something like that, the engineer that's going to be doing it looks to see in the area, and they can see the information is all out there.
I see. So
they
there
would
is
reach out to
a
us if they had.
process.
Yeah, if they are going to be doing that, that's the Con Ed has their own environmental group that goes and looks and see what's there, and if they have questions, then they reach out to DEC.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's all for me. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, Megan?
I want to take down my hand. Oops, okay. So just wanted to say that the idea that that was an emergency action with Con Edison, that's been there for 5 years, spewing steam into the air. So maybe it was, they called it an emergency thing. My dog had her paws burned on that 5 years ago. Snow has never fallen on that. It evaporates immediately. So emergency is sort of, I would call it a loose term. I also want to point out, though, the idea of the mercury levels that has been talked about. Scarlett, thanks, about a 30-year sort of look at how it would hurt or not hurt. The issue that we've had and we brought up from the beginning is that these are children whose blood-brain barrier has not been formed. And these are in utero kids. Like, you would not believe the number of teachers and parents who are carrying around babies inside them right now. So and I know that it was brought down to a much lower level, but there is no safe level of mercury vapor for these children. That's been, I think, established again and again. They don't have a blood barrier formed, and that's where the difference is. You and I can, sweat out the mercury over a bit of time. I also just wanted to point out that there was a town hall that was held, and there was a couple of questions, and I just want to put them into the record to see if we can get them addressed at some point. The biggest one is about the sort of baseline for the surrounding buildings, and also at Southbridge and at Beekman and the other areas, that there's supposed to be a survey done before any sort of intrusive work would start. So I just want to know, when is that scheduled for? Have all the buildings been reached out? I don't need that answer now. And also within construction guidelines, it's within 90 feet of a construction site that the baselines are meant to be handled and looked at and scheduled. So that's just one question that we'd like to have answered as a community. The other point that I wanted to bring up was about sound. And hang on one second. I want to just read into the record that Chapter 28 and Title 15 of the Rules of the City of New York describe the requirements for construction noise mitigation according to 15 RCNY 28-101I. Quote, when work is planned near sensitive receptors, including but not limited to facilities such as schools, hospitals, places of worship, and homes for the aging, the responsible party shall cooperate with the facility owner or operator to coordinate the work schedule so as to minimize the noise impact of the facility. So I just want to put that on the record, that is a requirement. And I know that Mimi has said over and over again that Langan will function within those requirements. To that end, we would like to see if the senator and assemblyman and Mr. Marte's office, Councilmember Marte, could you help us at Peck Slip and at the other adjoining areas get a noise monitor so that we can be the people who raise the alarm and know who to talk to when the standards go outside of what the parameters have been set. And I wanted to do one other thing, if I'm allowed to, Emily. I wanted to know, oh boy, I might have lost it. I'll find it again. There is a video of the way mercury vapor behaves, and it is really interesting, and I think speaks well to what Maggie was describing about how it poofs up, settles down, and disappears. So
Megan,
the
do you think you could
erroneous,
put it? Could you put a link to it in the chat, maybe?
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. So the idea that all of these readings are erroneous, I don't particularly think is accurate. I think that it's a tricky substance, and I think that it would feel better to have people say, yeah, there are spikes of it, but then it dissipates quickly. I chalking it up to mistakes or strange ghosts in the machine or humidity, it doesn't make me feel great, because we all know there's elemental mercury there.
Right.
I think
if I could
those
just-
are my, I think,
I could
Laura
just
has a
add, yeah.
response.
If I could just respond to that quickly, I want to make sure that it's very, very clear. There were the two malfunctions that Langan experienced and explained, Megan. My comment was specifically about those two. The data that Maggie is pointing to are instantaneous readings. So the action level is based on a 15-minute average. So that's why it's important, as we talked about earlier, to ensure that we know there's mercury out there. There's no question about that. It's in the soil. We know that. That's why we're having this oversight. That's why we're having all these very in-depth reviews of what's happening in the field. That's why we're verifying air quality as much as we can when the work is being done. That's why the test pits were done. That's why the J505 with the handheld monitor is out there. So all of this is really important input. But I just want to make sure that it's clear that we're not attributing every detection of an instantaneous reading as an equipment malfunction. There were those two that were, and they were erroneous, and that kind of thing can happen. So I just wanted to make sure that I'm clear on that. But there were no exceedances of the 15-minute average, the maximum time weighted average, and that's basically how this is all being monitored. In conjunction with the real-time data that the community's asked for, which is what Maggie's reviewing. And it's really important that all this is being brought forward and discussed all together and in conjunction. I just want to make sure that it's clear, though, that my statement was simply about those two erroneous readings, because we do see it
thank you for
happen.
clarifying that. And I really don't deny that Langan isn't within the parameters.
Right.
I question some of the parameters when it comes to the fact that these kids don't have a blood-brain barrier that's fully formed yet, and that they lay on the ground with chalk. So
Right.
I appreciate
I
that
understand.
what we have set up is great, but I also think that there's some opportunity to tweak it to be a little bit more responsive to what's in front of us.
Well, I think everyone's
Thank you
going to
for clarifying that.
right, taking all that input into consideration. So thank you.
Okay, and again, we'll get a follow-up on we'll get sort of
last,
further clarification
will
on the
camps
opinion
be-
about heights.
Sorry, one question. The camps, they will be up and operating for this. We talked about that, but will they be up and operating throughout the entire remediation? That is my other question, because I feel like I know that's true, but I've known other answers were true and they're not.
The camp will be up. The camps will be operating during the entire remedial action.
So Heidi, do you mean during soil disturbance activities?
Yes, during all remedial work where you're in ground intrusive work, there will
Right.
be a camp up.
Yeah, I
That
want
is
to
the remedial
clarify
action.
that, because there are instances where we may initiate remediation and then pause. For instance, we have this early foundation work, and then we're pausing, and then we'll do the hotspot removal. And they will not be operating simultaneously from first shovel in the ground
Yeah, there's
till
no-
last. It's during soil.
Yeah, there's no
disturbance
reason to run them when you're not doing work. Yeah,
Right.
I get it.
Right. Yep.
Thank
During
you.
remedial activities. Yep. Sorry. Thank you for the clarification, Mimi.
Sure.
And Megan, just since one of your questions is effectively to us, I mean, I would certainly support making sure there's proper sound monitoring wherever it needs to be, including, at the schools. I would just say that, I mean, sound and how it travels through the environment and how it actually affects people's activity, students or others, is notoriously complicated. And I think that if there is noise that is affecting the functioning of the schools, we'd love to hear about that in real time in any case. Like there's a little bit of subjectivity. If teachers or students or anybody else in the schools or parents are noticing problems, I think notifying, the developer promptly and also notifying the electeds promptly. And I think we we'll sort of aggressively address that and monitor it and try to make sure that we're minimizing that. But, so we can talk about whether having kind of physical monitors on site is useful. I mean, it's going to vary depending on what room in the school you're in, et cetera, too. So
All of our classrooms.
Yeah, and I
face
just like to,
50.
yeah. And I'm sorry, Megan, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just need to clarify, DEC has, we have no authority over noise. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, that we can't do anything about that, just so that it's understood
the
that we're not
city-
the ones you should
it's,
report it
it's
to.
the other environmental agency, surprising, it's DEP is the noise
Right.
maven in New York City. So I mean, let's talk about the noise issue and, maybe talk to DEP a little bit as well. And see what we can do to make sure we're being properly addressed. But again, if there are concerns, I mean, I've had fights with there was a big construction project in Brooklyn around the BQE that involved it was very loud and very close to a school. And, a lot of it is just, on a daily basis, figuring out what's going on and mitigating and, preventing. So let's just stay in touch about that. And why don't we consult DEP about this? And obviously the community board may have some strong thoughts on this. I see Tammy. So but again, maybe another forum, or maybe we need to pull, another agency into this conversation at some point. Okay. All right. So I think Elaine, you're up.
Hi, thank you everyone for attending. These meetings are important. I have a logistical question. Can we go over, Mimi, can we go over lane and street closures and when they're going to occur? Will there be a lane closed on Pearl Street starting April 15th when the lot closes? Will Beekman Street be closed off? I know there was some reference to this earlier, but I'd like to confirm that. So we
No,
can,
not during this limited foundation work.
no lane closures, no.
We don't,
street
we don't
closures.
expect to have any lane closures.
Okay, thank you, Paul. The other one was, when can we, and who will you contact to get access to the pre-construction survey? Is that pre-construction survey coming up on us right away? I'd like to notify the appropriate and have people like the maintenance, the director of maintenance and the new managing agent and everybody on board.
Yeah, we will be reaching out in the very near future to schedule those. But I will say Southbridge is not one of the identified locations. Since it's outside of 90 feet, it's also not considered a historic resource.
I was told that didn't apply the last, that didn't apply.
It's not, we don't.
Not historic, but.
Well, it's outside of 90 feet. So I'm just saying in terms of what LPC monitors, it's not, but it's also not required under building code or DOB requirements.
But will we be getting a review? I mean, will somebody?
No, I don't think we don't. My understanding is that from an engineering perspective, it's not required.
From the extension into Pearl Street, we're not, where the Mercury buildings, thermometer factories were, we are not, we are within that 90-foot range. If we go by
not the building footprints are, but we can take another look at that, but that's the analysis that was done.
Okay. All right, I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Adam?
Hi, everyone. To those who don't know me, I'm Adam Sinofsky, part of the board at Southbridge Towers. I, and maybe this was covered because I had to join the meeting a little bit late. Has the plan for air monitoring factor in that we have Southbridge Towers as air intake vents along 299, along Pearl Street, especially for 299 Pearl, that sucks in air at ground level and circulates it throughout the whole building?
Yes, we're aware of that, Adam.
Have you identified the location and made sure that the air monitoring will capture that? Just because I believe those air intakes are at ground level, not 4 to 5 feet high.
Adam,
Which the whole case about it being at breathing level is kind of,
Right.
regulated null, given that it's going to be sucked in and circulated through our whole building.
Right, the monitoring is performed at the perimeter of the site, and we have not seen any exceedances of action levels. Therefore, the assumption is that air traveling beyond those locations similarly is at similar or lesser concentrations.
Were those monitoring done at 4 to 5 feet high or at ground level?
3 to 5 breathing zone.
But like I said, it's sucked in at the level where your feet are, the grates are. I believe the grates are at your feet. Have you guys worked with our maintenance staff to identify where they are to make sure that would be covered by the monitoring?
We have not specifically worked with your maintenance. You're welcome to put them in touch with us.
Okay, but you do know where our air intake is?
We have observed air intakes around the perimeter of your building.
And so you factor that into the plan.
Our camp is protective of the community, yes.
The
Also-
other,
I'm sorry to interrupt, just to add to that too, as they had said before, the handheld instrument also goes down to the level at all the way ground level at times for the area of the excavation on the site itself too, to take into account in addition to the perimeter 3 to 5 foot breathing heights. So that's something that's also taken into consideration closest to where excavations are going on, where they can even screen material coming out. So if we're not generally seeing any exceedances of action levels there, we wouldn't expect those levels even right at the ground surface there to be higher off-site near where the air intakes are, regardless of exactly where they are. Just so you know that additional is going on as part of it. And you may have missed that from the beginning of the discussion if you joined late.
If I could also just.
I
jump-
just respectfully disagree when you keep saying the breathing level. It's sucking the air and spreading it throughout our whole building. So
Yeah, so Adam, let's just take breathing level as a technical term that is used by environmental monitoring people. It's been noted that some people are not as tall as 3 feet, and obviously that's great. I think I think there's an open question whether the DEC or the environmental consultants can get back to us about further review of the question of whether it might be appropriate and possible to
Just
monitor air at a level lower than
I
3 feet.
just want to be
fair
kind of
enough.
to revisit some of that. I think, Scarlett had touched on this earlier, but when we talk about how mercury vapor behaves, it's going to behave vastly differently outdoors in ambient air than it's going to in a controlled indoor environment. So I think, the video we watched, you can be in an indoor environment with no airflow, no temperature changes, and yeah, it's going to potentially sink down. Outside, that's not how mercury vapor behaves. There's too many other effects for that to happen. So temperature changes and wind direction are going to disperse it. So it's not going to just sit at the ground and move around. That's not how it operates. So I just want to be clear because I think that kind of seems to be being extrapolated to like the entire neighborhood. We have perimeter monitoring stations, and the key here is that we have a lot of redundancy. We're monitoring with a handheld unit at the potential source. Anytime we see a elevated reading at a perimeter station or the work zone station, work is stopped and we investigate it. And that's how things happen during the work. And that's how we stop work, we go check on the unit and make sure we can perform any maintenance that's necessary. And then as long as things are working properly, we go back to work. So there's a lot of redundancy here within the camp on site at the perimeter. So I just want to be clear that there are a lot of different levels here that we use to monitor at the perimeter of the site.
do you recommend we turn off would we keep in mind, I understand, yes, it's not going to behave as mercury in a vacuum, but at the same time, it's not in open air because we have fans that suck in air, which is going to suck anything towards us.
The fact that the air intakes are like hundreds of feet from the site is the reason why it's not a concern.
I wouldn't say it's hundreds of feet, it's directly across the street. How wide is Pearl Street?
Pearl Street's about 60 feet and there's space in between.
So that's not
Pearl Street
hundreds
and
of feet, that's 100 feet from the site. Simple math. This is not, don't exaggerate. I'm just trying to figure out, as a board of director for Southbridge Towers, who has the fiduciary duty for 5,000 residents of Lower Manhattan, do you think we are okay with our air induct system on sucking in air from across the street of the site? Or are you recommending we turn it off? I don't know how to answer that question to my residents right now. And the fact that your air intakes are 3 to 5 feet high, and I don't want to scare my residents either. And it's just the fact that we're hearing things 3 to 5 feet high when we have intake at ground level with the fan on. Doesn't sound like it was factored in. And so what do you recommend that our residents do? And would you be more than happy to send it out in a blast with your email on it to answer all of our residents' questions?
This is Scarlett from Department of Health. Based upon the work that's going on there, we feel that the camp is protective and is reflective of the outside of the work zone in the community. So if there's air intake out there, be it 100 feet, 60 feet away, we feel like that is not something that you would need to shut off. We don't have any indication here from the perimeter monitoring zones or within the work zone that there's been any exceedances that would be a concern for the air intakes for your residents. So as far as, I get it, I understand you want to make sure you're protective of the community, and we do as well. But that's not an exposure concern in our opinion, based on all the data that we've gotten from all of the work that's been done so far, including test pitting in areas that are hot spots, higher concentrations on the site. We don't feel that that is something you would need to do, is shut those off. Is that, did I answer that clearly enough?
Can I get that in writing?
Yeah.
I'd love to get that in writing so we can share it with our residents who are very concerned. So, after 9/11 and cancers in this neighborhood, they're very concerned. Some, I think, overly concerned, but I just want to make sure that we can, alleviate those concerns. And I, as a member of the board of directors, getting, unclear information. So I'd like to get that just clear, simple sentence. There's no need for, So,
yeah. I mean, I'll talk with you otherwise and how I'd like to get something like that to you. But in general, I mean, we've written that we have approval letters, our concurrence letters of the remedial action work plan, campus protective. We'll work with you to get you something that works for you.
This is Nora Ostrowski. I'm going to jump in for a second. I'm the president of the board, and Adam articulated our concerns very well. And I would just want to put this question to you in a slightly different way. If you lived right across the street from the site and there was an option to switch those air intakes off, would you do that as an extra precaution? If your children lived in our building across from that site, like 60 feet from that site, would you do that as an extra precaution and tell residents that you took that precaution just in case? Or would you just take a letter from the Department of Health and said, oh, we have a letter, so we have nothing to worry about? Like if your kids were there, what would you do?
If my kids were there, I'd do the same thing I'm recommending to you right now. I mean, I've got my son homesick right now from school. This is something that I take into consideration. Every time we look at anything, we always put ourselves in that perspective of what would I do if these were my children. And I recognize that. I understand that that's a concern. But for me, the air intakes, I wouldn't recommend shutting them off from the work here. Fresh air is important to get in to communities, into inside structures. One of the issues that you see is when there isn't enough fresh air intake, you can have a lot more concerns with air quality in general. So shutting them off when there's no indication that it's necessary due to the site work there, I don't think that I would recommend in general. You want more fresh air intake into the inside, and not just for airborne contaminants you may find in an urban environment anyway, but also because of, germs and one of the things we know is that air quality tends to go down, especially in the heating season, in the winter season when things are closed up more and there's less fresh air. You may notice that, during the summer, our kids don't tend to get sick as much. There's a lot more fresh air coming in, and there's definite links to fresh air coming in and air quality. So I would not recommend turning air intakes off unless there was an indication it was necessary, which we're not seeing from this site.
Thank you.
Okay, so Nora and Adam, if just because we only have 5 more minutes, a few more questions, but we can move on, but we'll follow up and make sure you get the, the assurances that you need. And I also would just note that for those who really want to get in depth, a video of this exchange will be available, and you can refer them to it and they can watch for themselves. I have Alice, and then Noah, and Denise, and Laura, and Warren. So it's a bunch now, and we're scheduled only for 5 minutes. Let's try to be quick.
Yeah, you have very little time. So thanks. I just am going to change things just a bit here, and I just want to get clarity on the archaeological due diligence at the site. So I'm not sure who this will be addressed to, but would someone please explain?
I'm sorry, is that related to the remedy? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to.
If I could ask my question, thanks very much, Heidi. I'm asking, and perhaps it's not germane, but I certainly think it is to please explain how the reporting of archaeological findings will occur during this upcoming excavation for the early foundation and remediation work. Who's responsible for doing this work? Who will report to the community about the findings? You are now doing excavation work, right, for this foundation, and we'd like to know what kind of.
We have a registered archaeologist. AKRF will be representing us. They'll be on site.
I'm sorry, Adam. Could you just say that again? Who is that?
AKRF.
AKRF.
AKRF, an engineering firm.
Yep.
And also with archaeological expertise will be on site.
When will they be on site? How does that work? Can you just describe they're going to be on site during this excavation?
During the excavation, at the appropriate time, they will be there to monitor. And there's an approved plan with Landmarks Preservation Commission, and they'll be following those protocols and reporting to landmarks.
Would you be good enough just to follow up with sending over that plan? And would you also have can AKRF come to present their findings at a future meeting for the community, please?
I would say you should please reach out to landmarks to get the plan from them. But we will, to the extent it makes sense and it's a good use of the community's time to come before the community board to talk about archaeology, we can do that. I don't know if it'll,
we just want to have
after the 421A work will be the best time, but we can talk about that.
Okay, well, we've certainly had a lot of conversation, and it's something that always gets rolled over. That's why I'm bringing it up here today on record. We want to have an understanding of the archaeological findings. That is part of the work you're doing. It is critical work for the city of New York, and we want to have AKRF's findings upon this upcoming excavation. I feel strongly, and we've spoken about it. I have certainly been in touch with LPC and have yet to get those plans. So whatever help you can give, I'd really appreciate it. Move on to another topic, but it is critical that we have this information given to us.
Okay, and I saw Tammy shaking her head yes as well. So I think we'll discuss whether this forum or the community board is an appropriate place to follow up on that. But yeah, the point is taken. Alice, did you have something else or?
No, thanks very much.
Okay, great. Noah.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'll be quick. I had put 2 questions into the chat. The first was about confirmation about action steps. Should noise from the construction interfere significantly with instruction at either Peck Slip or Blue School? Just who do we call? How do we initiate that? And I know, Senator, you spoke a little bit to that before, but just wanted to make sure that it was clear about what we should do in order to, should that occur.
I will say as a preliminary matter, call us. We'd be happy to hear about that in real time. You may choose to call 311 as well, so they're officially logging. Sometimes that's useful if it's going to be an ongoing issue. just because they will log it, although I see some skepticism of that being resulting in immediate action, which I understand, but it's still, I think, still worth doing it. But also, I think to somebody from the developer, how should if the school is having noise issues, who should they call?
They should call a designated representative of our team. As of the moment, it's Ricky Wong, but we will be providing additional details for the best way. But you can contact me as well. But we'll be back in touch with in terms of and of course Peck Slip School on some more detailed protocols as we get closer to the commencement of the work.
And Ricky Wong just added his email to the chat.
Terrific. And second question was more of a comment. The description of the narrative of the interactions with Con Ed about the work along Pearl Street did not gel with my experience with them when they were beginning their investigation about Water Street. When I spoke to them, to both the person who was in charge of the Con Ed work and also the person who was running the construction for them, neither one of them knew anything about the 250 Water Street project, nor any of the environmental concerns that I brought up. And so I'm happy to hear that this may be different now, a month and a half later. But when I initially interacted with them, they had no idea and did not seem to have any additional.
Okay, I think we'll just take, DEC, do you want to respond or?
No, I mean, I've spoken with Con Ed's environmental, and they were well aware of it. They had been on DEC Info Locator and were well aware of all the things. I don't know what interactions they had with you a month and a half ago. I at this point in time, I can tell you they're very well aware of everything and have had numerous conversations with Department of Health.
So it may be that the folks on site were not as well informed as they should have been by Con Ed. We'll follow up with Con Ed and inquire in the aftermath of this what their current assessment is. Yep. Denise, and I do want to emphasize it's 12:31. We want to try to get out relevant.
Sure. My question is super quick. I was wondering if Langan wouldn't mind sharing again the slide with the work schedule very quickly.
Paul, do we still have?
Yeah, give me one sec. I think Mike has it. Yep.
There was one before that as well.
Also,
Thank you.
just so everyone knows, we're going to get the slides from Langan after this, and I'll send it out to everyone, so you'll have the PowerPoint.
Thank you very much.
It's super important for those people who are not on this working group that we have a level of transparency to be able to share this and post this, so the community board, when they do get questions, are able to answer it to the best of their knowledge.
So we'll get it soon and post it soon.
This was submitted as part of our schedule change and is on our website, the 250bcp.com.
Thank you, Langan. And just as you'll see Pat Moore and I noting, we need to make sure that the contact person that's given to the public is somebody who will answer whatever phone line or email 7 days a week. I obviously don't expect answers at midnight. That's a 311 complaint, but I do think that 7 days a week for a project like this in the middle of a residential and school area needs to be monitored.
Is there availability 7 days a week?
As I said, we'll get back to you on specific protocols, but I believe that will be the case, but I'd like to confirm with our team what we think the optimal scenario is.
Okay, I agree with Tammy that it's important. Denise, are you good? Okay, yeah, it looks like, so Laura, it looks like you have the last word.
Last man standing. I just wanted to go back just quickly to Adam and Nora's concerns. In the beginning, when we commented and reviewed the draft remedial action work plan, or no, I'm sorry, the draft RI work plan, I had inspected the entire perimeter of the site with Elaine Kennedy and others. We identified all of the air intakes. And one of the reasons for our asking for additional camp units above and beyond the originally proposed 4, adding an additional 2 on both Pearl and Water, was to address the concern that there could be intake, air intakes operating across the street at ground level. That was one of the reasons why we expanded the camp, and I think the agencies ultimately agreed. The other thing is when our staff are on site, what we specifically do every time is walk with our Jerome mercury vapor analyzer and PID for volatiles and dust meter around the outer perimeter of the area. So on the opposite side of Pearl Street, along the air intake side, along the Water Street side, close to the Blue School, along Beekman, along Peck Slip, at ground level as well as midair, not all of the time at ground level, but moving the meter around, walking around the outer perimeter. So because Langan has got the downwind monitor on site, and then they have the perimeter camp, and even if that's moved across the street, we're getting behind that. Because that's the added level of just double checking. So we were on site multiple times during the RI and found nothing. We were on site during the test pit investigation in the mercury impacted areas and found nothing. We've actually never seen anything more than just a trace that's consistent with background, like 0.01 type readings on the other side of the street. So it backs up basically the overall assessment that's being made with respect to all of the data. And I just wanted to make sure that we reminded people of that, because it's been a long time now since the original set of comments were provided. And it's one of the reasons why we feel that the camp as designed, is protective. And I think we will all take back the comments from today and have further discussions. But I do still feel that it is a protective camp. So I just wanted to make sure that I ended on that note, because in my professional opinion, that is my perspective. Thank you for, okay.
Okay, so that's a good note. So we are 6 minutes over time. I appreciate everybody's patience, but we did get through a lot of questions. We will have obviously a series of follow-up items that we'll try to get out to folks, including, we'll post the recording of this as soon as we get it, and get the presentation as well and get that out to everybody. So unless there are closing remarks or burning questions, I think we'll adjourn, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Really appreciate everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you very much. All
Yes,
right,
thank
bye-bye.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.